Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So this is my first time doing a fireside chat, and I'm going to have my little paper with me, so please bear with me. Hi, Patrick.
Hi.
So at first earlier, one of the speakers, they talk about nature versus nurture. And for me, I would really like to know a bit more about you and how you grew up. So can you start by sharing your story and how you grew up?
Sure. My parents were born in Fujian, China, but they went to Taiwan when they were very young because of the war. So they basically grew up in Taiwan. Then they came to the States for grad school. And I was born in Los Angeles. My dad was teaching at UCLA. Then he went to Maryland to teach there. And so I moved over to Maryland when I was 5, grew up there, then came out back to to California to go to school here at Cal. After we sold Rotten Tomatoes, went to China for 3 years, went to Hong Kong for 6 years, and then came back to the Bay Area. So kind of all over the place.
Okay, interesting. So I guess, when did you discover your sense of mission in life? Like, what made you decide to come up with Rotten Tomatoes, and did you start any other companies before Rotten Tomatoes?
So yeah, I've done 6 startups. Rotten Tomatoes is actually the 3rd. And what I realized actually fairly recently was it wasn't even so much about doing companies. I've always liked to get people together, build communities, kind of just organize things. I'm actually kind of OCD. So I think it was actually just an offshoot of just getting people together, like, hey, let's do something. You know, when I was in high school, I was very active and helped start the Chinese club there. And then when I was at UC Berkeley, I was really active in this martial art called Wushu. So I got really into that. And actually, a lot of the people that I did my company with were people like classmates who were also taking Wushu. And doing these different startups, it was more just like keeping everyone together. So one thing for me was I always felt like, you know, when everyone graduates from school, they go all over the place for college. And then graduate from college, they go all over the place for work. And my thought was, you know, these friends at work are probably not necessarily as good as your friends from college, who might not be as good as your friends from high school. Like, why does everyone have to just keep spreading out? And so for me, it was like, let's do a company to keep everyone together.
This is for you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Talk about very extra. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was kind of unexpected, but going back to that, so are you still doing that now?
Yeah, so I've been taking a break from doing startups. And so I've been doing a lot of like speaking, a lot of mentoring, helping out at Berkeley and other different like accelerators and incubators. Just was helping at a tech accelerator in Hawaii. And also helping out with a lot of events. So organizing my own events, doing stuff up here, also supporting other organizations. So I'm active with like the Asian Pacific Fund, and also very active with a group called Gold House. And they're basically like kind of like prominent members, Asians within tech and venture and entertainment, and trying to support Asians in America.
Okay. And also, as far as the entrepreneurial spirit goes, did you always have that in you, or how did you find that?
I think I did. It's more just because I always felt like, maybe because I was OCD, I always felt like I want to do it a certain way. Mm-hmm. And if it's not the normal way, then I'll just do it myself. And I would say one of my abilities more than anything else was the ability to kind of like get people together to do something. Like, hey, let's do this, and convincing people of something. And I would say that was always my biggest strength, was, you know, getting friends to like quit school and like doing a company together, or, you know, trying to raise money, or getting clients, or, you know, convincing someone else to kind of leave school or leave their job to come work with us. Mm-hmm. So that was always my thing. And I think that being entrepreneurial was more just being stubborn and wanting to do things my own way.
Interesting. I guess a lot of us could probably relate to that. And I will say, what are some of the biggest challenges you have in life, especially going through the 6 companies that you had before Rotten Tomatoes?
I think probably the biggest challenge when you do a startup, or I think anything on your own, is like stress. It's not easy to do your own thing. I'm sure anyone here who's done their own business, there's a lot of ups and downs, and it's sort of like, how do you keep pushing through when it's maybe not going well? Mm-hmm. And it's rare that everything just goes perfect. And so kind of pushing through, especially if you're, a founder or the CEO, how do you keep everyone else motivated? Everyone's looking to you for direction and to stay charged. I like to say that you're like a battery that everyone's plugged into you, and they're all, taking charge from you. But then how do you stay charged in that situation? So I think that is like a really huge challenge. And obviously, when things are growing, it's not that hard. But when it's flat or declining, it's super hard.
Okay, so what were I will say, since you said that your biggest challenges was to stay afloat and making sure that you're all there. So what did you do? What type of things did you practice in order to kind of like get yourself away from that or overcome it?
I honestly wasn't great at it. I just kept trying to put more time in, cut out everything else. So I didn't have a very good work-life balance as far as relationships, friends, family, all that stuff. I just put everything into work. Uh-huh. One thing I realized afterwards, since I've been on this break for about 2 years now, and thinking about it, I realized actually when I was in Hawaii just a couple of months ago over the summer, helping out this tech accelerator group, I was constantly given this advice of like, you're trying to do too much. You're trying to do too much. And for 2 months, I was basically hammering in, like, you need to focus more, you need to do less. And then I realized, like, oh man, I was doing the same thing myself, especially my last 3 startups. After we sold Rotten Tomatoes, the next 3, all 3 of them, I was trying way too much. I think as a result of after Rotten Tomatoes, I'm like, oh yeah, I can totally do more, but actually that was wrong. And so the thing now that I believe very strongly in, and a lot of times when I go and speak, is specifically around focus. And when you're just starting out and you have very few resources, usually it's like 1 to 3 or 4 friends, probably little to no funding, or you're probably putting your own money in. If it's something technical, but you don't have an engineer, or you're like trying to pay some design firm or consultant to help you with it. But people, especially like entrepreneurs, they always want to do everything. They think they can do anything, and which is, they can actually a lot of times, but because they think they can do anything, they want to do everything. And so they end up doing, like, biting off more than they can chew. And when that happens, you can't do everything well, right? It's like trying to be, Cheesecake Factory instead of being In and Out. And so that was something I learned after the fact. And I've been trying to share that message. Because I actually think if you can stay focused, like a magnifying glass, you have all this light or the sun, but it doesn't do anything. It just puts light and heat everywhere. But if you can actually put it onto one point, you can start a fire, right? And if you can do that, by doing less, you actually can accomplish more. But also by doing less, you're going to be less stressed as well. So it's like everything is good when you can kind of focus. Unfortunately, I wish I realized that earlier. Yeah. And with Rotten Tomatoes, for instance, that one actually did well because it was focused, and it was almost like by accident that it was focused because we didn't raise that much. The internet bubble burst literally 2 months after we raised. 9/11 was a year and a half after the bubble burst. So it kind of forced us to be very focused just to survive. Mm-hmm. But actually that focus was what made it successful.
I see. So, I wish I met you sooner because myself, I'm an entrepreneur, and oh my gosh, people who know me, they know that I am a visionary. I always have all these great ideas. But at the end of the day, everyone's like, Ashley, just focus, focus on what you're good at. So I definitely agree with that. Yeah. But going back to that, so Rotten Tomatoes, I understand that there's other founders, correct?
Yep. two other main founders.
And how did you decide to choose these business partners?
So Steven was our CTO, and I knew him from Wushu. And Sen, who was our creative director at our design firm before Rotten Tomatoes, he was the one who actually came up with the idea for Rotten Tomatoes. He was down the hall from me from freshman year of college. Actually, all 6 companies, I have at least one co-founder that I knew from freshman year of college. And a couple of them were like literally same floor. Yeah.
I see. And were there ever any I guess challenges for the 3 of you? Because there's always like different personalities with people, right? So how would you be able to overcome obstacles if one person's like, I want it this way, and the other person's like, no, I want it that way?
Yeah. So in that situation, I mean, with founders, it's basically like marriage. You're going to be working with these people more than and seeing these people more than you will your own like significant other or spouse. And a lot of times people just jump in and be like, hey, let's do a company together, but they barely know each other. And you could do that with a marriage too. You could go to Vegas and have a shotgun wedding, but it generally doesn't work out well. You're going to get divorced. And I would say that's a primary reason why people have trouble. Luckily with them, I knew them for years before we tried doing a company. And we did have issues, but in our case, what was really good was the 3 of us had very different roles. So Sen was the one who created it, was a product person. Steven was technical, and I was like the business side. And so we didn't really step on each other's toes. And the one thing we tried to do internally was we never put anything to the vote. With 3 people, you could totally do 2 versus 1. But we're like, no, we're just gonna, if we have some disagreement about something, we're just gonna go into a room, and if it takes a couple hours or a couple days, sometimes we're even like yelling at each other, but we work it out until we come to something that we all agree is the best path, and not just do like a 2 versus 1 or anything like that. And so that's how we handled it.
Okay, interesting. So what parts of your daily routine are most important to you now? I just have to ask that because, nowadays on social media, everyone's always like routine. You have to wake up at 5 a.m. and, put in your workout and all this stuff. I want to hear what routines do you have?
I don't have a great routine. I like sleeping, and my schedule's kind of off a lot. I do everything through email. So even like my to-do list is my email. So if I'm I need to do this thing, I just email myself that thing. And so for me, a big thing is to try to stay on top of my email, which is always a challenge. And so I'm battling that like probably hours every day to kind of stay on top of things. And for me, I like, again, because I'm OCD, I like to be able to respond to everything. My problem now personally is I like to say yes to things, which is not great. But people are like, hey, can we get a coffee? Can we do a Skype call or email on this advice? And I'm like, yeah, sure, that's no problem. And so I actually respond to everything, and yeah, so
that's what got you here.
Yeah. No. Well, in this case, they've asked a couple times, but I was always out of town. But luckily, it worked out this year.
Okay, so with your OCD-ness, how are you able to delegate all these duties to other people, especially with all these companies? I'm sure, building it from scratch and seeing this is your baby essentially, right? Mm-hmm. So how are you able to delegate it, and what type of skills do you have to have in order to do so?
So I think, again, with like Rotten Tomatoes and some of these other companies, it was always good to have co-founders or people that you bring on that have different skill sets than you and can handle certain areas. So like technical or product, I didn't worry about that. I knew they were going to handle it. I'd have some feedback or my thoughts, but then they make the ultimate decision. The other thing is get people who are better than you at other things, right? You can't do everything yourself. It's going to be a mess, and it's not going to be a big company if you try and do that. So yeah, learning to delegate and specifically hiring people that know so much more about something that you're not going to question them.
Mm-hmm. So when times are rough, is there any specific method you have in order to just go through it? Like if you're super stressed or super angry or your emotion starts running wild, is there anything that you do, like breathing wise, exercising wise? What would you like to do?
I'm super stressed, super angry. Probably just have silence. I mean, just go and spend time just by myself, not doing anything. I'm a huge nerd, go watch some anime and play some video games or something, and just be by myself, and then time fixes a lot of these things.
Okay. The reason why I asked that is just we have some mutual friends, and they told me that you have some interesting hobbies. Is there anything that you might want to share in terms of hobbies?
Interesting hobbies?
might have to do with something along the lines of rapping.
Oh. I mean, yeah, sometimes when I hang out with friends, there's some of them that like to go to karaoke. And it's something I picked up kind of when I went to Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, sometimes if I had a couple drinks in me, like the one thing I realized is like I can't sing. So when I was in Asia, I remember someone had put on Eminem, was it like Lose Yourself or something? And I didn't really, I heard the song before, and I'm just like, I can read this, kind of in the right pace. And then I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then it sort of in Asia kind of became my thing because I couldn't sing. And so I decided, if everyone goes one way, I go the other way. Yeah.
So not singing, but rapping.
Yeah.
So we need a couple shots right now.
Yeah, no.
So that you can sing. Does anybody have Lose Yourself on your phone right now?
No.
Okay, so what is your priority in life now?
I'm trying to figure out what's next. I've always done startups. The 6 startups were across 23 years straight, just back to back. And I, especially the last 3, they didn't go so well because, again, I wasn't focused. Those 3 companies combined were 15 years, over about 7 million that we had raised. And so it's a lot of pressure. And when you have like that level of stress of trying to just keep things going, you have so many people relying on you, like your employees, your co-founders, your investors, your reputation, your users, your clients. I was having like health issues, like literally ended up getting this thing like called hyperthyroidism, which is like partly triggered by stress. I was having shortness of breath. I was insomnia. I was even having like rashes, just like break out. And I was like getting tested. I was like, I think it might be gluten. I don't know. And it turned out it was actually stress. And once I decided to take a break, it all went away. And so I've been trying to figure out what's next. If all I've ever done is startups, but I don't think I have the energy to do another startup, what do I do after that? And so I've just been on this break, trying to figure that out. And I do feel like it's something around community or something around getting people together because that's something I've always liked to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what do you have a passion for if you were to go towards that route?
One thing I've been doing is I've been trying to get this like intersection of tech and venture and entertainment together. It's something that was, with Rotten Tomatoes, when I was doing this company in Hong Kong called Alive Not Dead, which was like almost like a MySpace for Asian artists. So I always liked doing that. I've been toying with the idea of maybe trying to put together like a film fund or something in that arena because I definitely think there's a lot more that can be done there. And there's a lot of interesting stuff happening with, Crazy Rich Asians and The Farewell and all these movies that Asians, even though there's a lot of stuff that's interesting happening, I think there's a lot more that we need to grow. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it might be interesting to be a part of that and to help that process.
Awesome. That'll be pretty good. So finally, we are in the Bay Area, especially San Francisco. We have so many entrepreneurs, right? So with all these budding entrepreneurs, what type of advice would you have or would you give them with starting their first business?
It's the same thing I said before, focus. What I tell people is when you're just starting out, do one feature or product for one category for one market. No more. And it's easy to justify, like, no, we need the second feature, or no, we need to do 2 categories, or no, we also need to do this other market. But you can always do those later. And every company you can think of, go look at them in the way beginning, and they all were focused. The ones that are not focused, you've never heard of. Facebook started off as just Harvard. Amazon was just books, for those of you old enough to remember. That's all they were. They were an online bookstore. They actually went IPO just selling books. It wasn't until year 2 or 3 of being IPO that they added, I think, CDs and then DVDs, right? Google was just web search. It wasn't all the stuff you see now, maps and all the things. Yeah, when you're, like $1 trillion company or something, you can do more things, but not when you're, again, just starting out. Rotten Tomatoes, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Snapchat. Like Twitter, is like a status update, and you can't be more one thing than Twitter, right? Look at Boba Guys, right? So all these ones that have been successful, they do one thing and they do it really well, not lots of things badly. And so anyone who's starting out, be super focused. Like that is the number one thing you have to do. And it's really hard because even when I talk to entrepreneurs all the time and I give them advice and they tell me all this stuff and I'm like, you need to focus more. You need to do this. They can always justify why they need to do this, and this. And I'm like, you can tell them like 10 times and they still won't get it. It's super hard to like get through it. And even myself, my last 3 companies, I knew it in my head, but you still kind of ignore it. You always can justify why you have to do this extra thing. And honestly, it's wrong. So that would be my advice.
So that's why you have to learn to say no.
Yeah.
Not say yes to everything.
Yeah. This is just me personally, but for business, yes, you need to learn how to say no.
So for all you budding entrepreneurs out there, you heard him. Focus, and even though you know it, apply it. Knowing is not enough. Apply it.
Yep.
Well,
and always ask someone else too. And I'm sure people around you will be like, "You're doing too much," and listen to them.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashley.